Welcome to Mom and Mind, a podcast about maternal mental health from conception to pregnancy and postpartum. Real stories from moms and family members who have made it from struggling to wellness, and interviews with experts and advocates who work for moms and families to get the help they need. We discuss very real struggles that can sometimes be hard to hear, but these are stories that need to be told so that moms and families can know that healing is possible. This podcast is meant to offer information and awareness and is not a replacement for treatment by a professional. Thank you for being with us today.
Welcome back to Mom and Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On this episode, I get to chat with Mark Williams, a dad who went through paternal postpartum depression and is now an amazing advocate for dads' perinatal mental health. He is sharing with us some of his own story and how he's getting the word out as a speaker around the world. He's from the UK, but recently spoke in Melbourne, Australia at the Marseille Society Conference. And today I get to speak with him from Seattle, where he's speaking on maternal mental health with PSI. Mark is the International Father's Mental Health Day founder and is well qualified in mental health through his own personal experience of panic attacks and postnatal depression following the traumatic birth of his son, a mental breakdown in 2011, living with ADHD, and the extensive training he has undertaken in mental health. He's also experienced the difficulty of trying to support his wife, Michelle, who suffered severe postnatal depression while being unwell himself. Mark is now an ambassador of the World Health Innovation Summit. He is now also a motivated speaker for people who want to better themselves from bad times in their lives. Thank you so much, Mark, for being here with us today.
Oh, thanks, Kat. Thanks for asking me.
Yes, I'm very, very excited to have you here today because, as we were just chatting about briefly before we got started, there's so few dads who are talking about their experience and so few people who actually know that fathers go through their own stuff during this period of time. And You're out there in the world telling everybody about your story, and it's so great.
Oh, thank you. No, it's something that I just felt that we have to make awareness, me and my wife, So I thank my wife also for letting me share her story as well. So yeah, it just needs to be told, really.
So what happened? How did you come to this work and being an advocate? What happened?
Yeah, if I'm honest, I didn't know nothing about mental health in 2004. Really hadn't educated about mental health. The pregnancy was fine, nothing wrong with the pregnancy. We had a nice house, good jobs, everything planned. But it was actually in the labour ward, things started to change to the point that after 22 hours labour, I remember the doctors coming in, rushing in, and they said, "Mr. Williams, your wife's got to have a emergency C-section now." And instantly I had my first ever panic attack. I was worried about my wife, I was worried about the baby.
Sure.
And that's the thing, you're witnessing your loved ones going through this trauma. And what I witnessed, I didn't know what was happening to me. What I was told later on, I actually had a panic attack.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, sitting here on my end, it's understandable that something that shocking would kind of send you into some type of panic, right? So that was the beginning of your experience?
Yeah, that's right. Well, after that then, my wife went onto the ward, Michelle, and instantly it was something wrong, I could tell by her eyes and she was very clingy to me, very, wouldn't let me go. And after about 3 days, my wife went home and that's when our hell really started, really. That's all I can say, really. It was, my wife was diagnosed really quickly with severe postnatal depression to the point that really she should have had a mother and baby unit. She didn't have perinatal psychosis, but obviously she wanted to harm herself, kill herself, to a point where she never made a plan. She wasn't Michelle I knew at the time, And unfortunately, things got worse. And what it was, and I had to give up work then for 6 months. So now there was no money coming in. I was self-employed. I have to look after my wife, who I obviously still really love and still love today. And obviously the baby, then the stigma around it, couldn't tell my friends, couldn't tell my, anyone to share that. And I was worried to actually tell my wife, Michelle, how I was feeling, because I didn't want it to affect her mental health any worse, So I really kept it to myself. So things obviously developed then. Yeah. And I was having, first time, what I know now was depression. And I was having suicidal thoughts around about the 4 to 5 months mark, And yeah, I remember just walking down the road in my city centre and a bus coming towards me. And I thought, if the bus hits me, at least I wouldn't have this agonising thoughts going through my mind. I didn't want to make a plan. I just want my mind from racing to stop, And so it was a bad time.
It got pretty bad for both of you very quickly.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Like you said, there was many factors that caused my depression, but I think it was a case of looking after my wife. It was really hard, and everyone's depression is totally different. Like it's not one family goes through exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's but certainly it was a bad time for me and my wife, and I started to drink then. Obviously my family, in the family circle, became involved. So I had a lot of support as well. A lot of families haven't got that support, unfortunately, as well. So, I did benefit from family support. I was starting to drink then. That was my coping skill.
Right.
So, my personality was starting to change as well. My mates, when I did manage to get out, which wasn't very much in the first year, it was a case of like my personality started to change when I could be kind of angry as well, very angry. And I'm not that sort of person either. Anyone who knows me, I'm very laid back normally. To the point I remember, punching the sofa and breaking my hand. I was even starting fights with doormen because I wanted somebody to hit me. So I wouldn't have these thoughts. In a way, what we know now is self-harming in a sense, in a different way, which is another topic, But yeah, it was really bad time. It was a case of like, I didn't realise how bad it was until you actually come out of it as well, I think my kickboxing was the thing that my physical health was really well up to that point, Never had any mental illness, never had any depression. I was very motivated in my job at the time as well, So,
yeah,
to have depression in the first 12 months, it was really hard time.
Wow. So how did you figure out that something was up, that things weren't right?
Yeah, well, I didn't actually go to the doctors. I just carried on. My wife was lucky enough to have a good nurse, the only specialist service in Wales. So something good came out of that as well. It was called NHS Prams, which is an organisation for mothers going through postnatal depression. So something good came out of that already then. Because my wife's, the services, it was nothing for my wife at that time.
Wow.
A lot good at the moment, getting a lot better in the UK now. And so, I just carried on. And it wasn't until about 5 years after, really. I kept it contained in my box, if I'm honest, the only way you can describe it.
Right.
But unfortunately, my mother had cancer and I lost my grandfather with dementia within 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
So, after Christmas. So what happened then, I couldn't contain that box any longer. I couldn't keep a lid on it.
Yeah.
And the depression came back even worse this time. And I didn't know what was happening one day. It was leading up to the breakdown. I wanted to sign myself into a secure unit, keep myself safe.
Mm-hmm.
I carried on, thinking, tomorrow will be better. And in October 2011, which is 5 years exactly to the day, more or less, I had a full breakdown. I just couldn't get out the car, anxiety. So fortunately, I had my phone on me because my suicidal thoughts were starting to get really deep now. I was having more thoughts every day.
Yeah.
And like I said, and still never made a plan, but I was just getting a bit of comfort in a way. It's hard to explain really, but I was in a real dark place. I remember, phoning up, finding on Google mental health services. And I took the first call because I honestly feel that if it wasn't for my son, I possibly could have gone on and done something, really bad, whether it was to take my life.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I did, get in touch with a GP, and I went to the GP. I was put on medication, and then I put on a counselling list then. Unfortunately, the counselling list didn't come. The counselling didn't come off the services. Oh. But I took it on. Yes, and I'm still waiting for the phone call now today.
What?
Which is 5 years later.
Oh my gosh.
But fortunately, I went private. I learned about CBT. I learned about mindfulness. And I was replacing positive coping skills instead of the negative ones, which I'd already used for any sort of any stress, So I would start to educate myself about mental health now as well. And it wasn't until, funny enough, how things happen. In a gym one day, I was in a gym waiting, getting myself well. I was actually working in a hospital now. I changed my career within this time. And it was a gentleman in the gym. And I said, can I borrow the weights? And he said, yes, no problem. I've got to go to NHS Prams hospital. And I said to him, what's NHS Prams? I'm just curious and working in the hospital. He said, well, my wife got postpartum depression. So I said, never. I said, my wife had that too, Michelle. So we started talking side by side. And instantly I found out that Brian actually witnessed his father, unfortunately, take his life. And he contained it in his box for 20 years. He had his own business. He had his own, he had his own business house, everything. He had it, going really well. And when his wife had postpartum depression, that's when he had a breakdown himself. And Brian, unfortunately, is still in services today. He's in his 50s now. So I was so curious. And I found out there was nothing for fathers.
Yeah.
And, that's when it all really started. I wanted to be a more family-focused service rather than just, mothers, really.
So during that time, had your wife had support and treatment?
Yeah, she was she had really good support, because it was really, there weren't much out there. But lucky enough, the lady who was my CPN, my community nurse, she really took interest, and she wanted Michelle actually to be a public speaker when she was better in the antenatal classes. That was in 2004. And it's funny that I'm doing that today now. And Michelle, obviously, my wife, is working in mental health. So we've both taken a career change. But it was really unknown for them, really, that somebody who had severe postpartum depression was coming knocking on their door too. Mm-hmm. Because what I found is, we were worried about social services being involved. We were worried about a lot of factors as well. So we did, and obviously the stigma, I think, especially back then, still today, still a lot of people not going forward.
It is true.
But my wife was well. So unfortunately, in 2012, my wife's, Michelle's, depression came back after looking after me this time. So that's the whole reason why I do campaign, to get a more family focused, because we need to, early prevention, it needs to be all treated, and that's the mother, the father, and the surrounding family as well, because obviously the family are going through it as well. So it just goes to show that, I've come across that mothers actually are well and the fathers are struggling, and it's impacting on the mother's mental health. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of the recent statistics is that if mom is depressed, dad is 50% more likely to be depressed also. And that's a huge number.
Absolutely.
That's a very, very big number. And yeah, I'm really love that you're bringing this perspective to be looking at the whole family, because I think maybe, I don't know how the medical system is where you are, but here for sure, we're sort of treated in parts, in separate ways. So, the OB, the gynecologist, they treat one thing, and the pediatrician treats one thing. And so nobody is looking after the whole, everybody. So this perspective is really, really needed, that this is a system, and what's going on for one person is impacting everybody potentially.
Absolutely. I think birth trauma actually in men, and that's the thing, I've been lucky enough to have, fathers open up to me. I think one of the reasons is because obviously they know I've gone through the experience as well, and communication I found is a massive to bring open these fathers up about what they're going through. I found that the fathers were really struggling. Fathers with a history of depression before they become fathers, they need to be monitored. There's fathers who have conditions like ADHD, like myself, Asperger's, there's loads of, conditions that can actually, when it comes to fatherhood, it's such a stressful time, as we know, the change. And also, if you've got a partner who's got postpartum depression, obviously that's got a massive impact on your mental health. If you're trying to, before you become fatherhood, you're already struggling to, keep well, so it's got a massive impact. And also like fathers who, maternal OCD, which is not talked about. Fathers, actually thinking the same as the mother, as well, they suffer from maternal OCD, and, check in. And, there's fathers I've spoke to actually, have, how to put it, witnessed so much in the birth, in the labour ward, that when they have a second child, they have an antenatal anxiety on the second child, because fearing that it may happen again, and they've got to go into the labour ward where, as we know, even a smell can trigger off PTSD or trauma or whatever. So more education needs to be done, especially around this field, in not just for the father, but for the mother, for the whole family.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly a lot of people don't, like you were saying, don't talk about birth trauma. Very, very few fathers are talking about their mental health at all, but certainly not birth trauma. And I think in part, some of the difficulty is, as you were describing, if mom's not doing well, or something's going on with the baby, you're sort of, typically it seems like the men are focusing on just getting through and taking care of and whatnot, and their mental health is kind of on the back burner. And this is also true for partners, anybody who has a partner who's birthing, for same-sex couples as well. So whoever the partner is that is not the birthing person is in a position to kind of have to keep things together, hold stuff together to make sure that baby's okay and mom is okay. And then your own mental health stuff is kind of put off for a bit, or maybe you can't attend to it the way you could have at some other point in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And when I set up, I started, 5 years ago, people were laughing, how can men get postnatal depression? And be honest with you, I didn't know I had postnatal depression until a doctor actually told me years later.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get the full, a real diagnosis. But even today, the thought, I've had flashbacks and nightmares about my son dying, my wife dying. I've had, the labour ward, the smell, if I ever went into there. It's certain songs, triggers those times. And like I said, it doesn't happen to everyone. And I got to make a really, everyone's totally different. But we chose not to have another child after that, So because obviously, what we went through. And it, like I said, it may and it could never happen again. But like I said, it was a case of our choice. The thought of going through what we went through again, it was just, could have broke us up.
Yeah, it's exhausting, if nothing else, but also can be very scary. It sounds like from what your experience from just being in the labor and, all this, the repercussions. That's the word.
Absolutely. And I think that's what I'm trying to change in the UK is the NICE guidelines. We've got guidelines that says professionals follow this procedure if the father's unwell, but there's not one mention of fathers on our guidelines. Yeah. So, like I said, policies need to be changed. As we know now, the research says 1 in 10 fathers actually suffer from postnatal depression. Yeah. But I believe it's more than that because a lot of fathers are not coming forward quick enough and then they actually get depression after the 12 months. So, it manifests like myself, 5 years later, manifests into other areas. Yeah. And we know that suicide rates amongst men around this time is really high in the UK and especially in America too. So we need to think, how many of these fathers actually go on. We need more research. More research needs to be done in postpartum as a whole, as a whole family.
So looking back on your perspective, now you have all this hindsight and you can see the kind of timeline of what was happening for you that right away you had the day of birth is when it started. And, with the work that you've done and your own therapy and getting through this, you can go back in time. But looking back then, what would you be able to tell fathers now who maybe are in the early stages or have a wife who's pregnant or even for partners who have a wife who's pregnant? What would you tell them to be paying attention to for themselves?
I feel that a lot of mothers have said to me that he's not talking about it. I get that a lot, his Mark, he's not talking, he's not telling me about what he went through and all that. That's one of the things I totally get because obviously, as a man, we try and be the strong one in the family and like I said early on, I was more concerned about my wife's, Michelle's depression than mine own. I didn't know. Right. What I know now is that, as soon as if you're feeling, low mood over the next couple of days, just speak to somebody, go to the GP, early prevention. It doesn't manifest into other areas. And also, we've got to remember it's an illness. You didn't ask for this illness. But a lot of fathers are not, not speaking out about it. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. This, right. You didn't ask for this. Right. And the first thing I realized was I stopped worrying what other people thought. Mm-hmm. And once I stopped worrying about what other people thought, that's when I really got the help then and talked about it.
Right. Yes. So you brought up stigma earlier, and that's a huge piece of this is, what are people going to think, especially with work? And I think for men specifically, there's this, it's for women too, but I think more so for men that this kind of, if you're not well, it means you're weak or it's somehow speaking to your character as a man. And, that's a shame.
Yeah. Well, I come from a tough mining community, coal miners, so to be honest, it was the best thing I ever done because the amount of men actually talk to me now about their own depression, which I would never thought of, This illness doesn't discriminate, it affects anyone, any walks of life. Yeah. And that's what we got to realize is that, it can affect anyone. So like I said, when I come out and told everyone about my depression, it's surprising how many people around you are actually going through the same thing. Oh. But once you start talking to the people, they do open up eventually. So 1 in 4, we know at least 1 in 4 now are going through. I feel it's higher than that, because of the stigma.
Yep. Right. And that's a strong piece of this. Half of it is, you don't want to admit to other people, but sometimes we don't even want to admit to ourselves that we're having a hard time because, that for many, many different reasons, either you have to stay strong for the family or you have to get to work, you have to, make money or whatever it is. But you made a very good point is that at some point, this will catch up to you if you don't address it sooner than later.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, if it doesn't happen this time, if another trauma happens in your life, like I said, like same as me and
Right.
Brian, I believe that, control that for years, but if something else happens, it's another. So yeah, early prevention, I always say to their fathers, just take control, take responsibility, and just go to the GP, go to your doctors, because the best thing that ever happened to me was when I got help.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, what a relief. I mean, and just by, talking about it here, and I know you speak all over and wherever you can about it, and I love your passion to get the word out and to be telling fathers and to be able yourself tell your story and show that it's not weakness. It's actually strength to come out and say like, oh, hey, this thing is happening and I'm getting help for it. I'm getting better because of it. And your quality of life is now, way better.
Absolutely. And a good thing that came out of it actually was when I was under service, so when I went to see a psychiatrist, I was actually diagnosed with ADHD, which is a condition I've had all my life. So obviously when I struggled in school with certain areas, I was very good at sport. That was my passion. Yeah, so I've learned about, the reasons behind that as well. So my low self-esteem have actually risen now because obviously for years, even going back the last couple of years, I still had low self-esteem, from school and other things because of ADHD. So like I said, it's something's, a lot of good have come out of this bad experience. And I believe that, a lot of these mothers and fathers who've actually experiencing depression are sometimes the best people actually to speak out about it as well, because, they're the ones who've, what I can say is are professors of their own illness, really, because they know that what it really feels like, and they more like to show empathy towards others as well in the field. I'm lucky enough to actually work with the Marseille president, Dr. Jane Hanley. So I've come to work with professionals now as well, so more so I've got a bit of a clinical background now as well more. And that's what I feel, with the both of us, a professional and also myself, it works well. It works really well. So I really encourage, people with experiences like I have to actually, team up with other professionals because they want to hear it. They want to hear your stories and so we can get more research out there for not just for this generation, for the generations behind us as well. Remember, I'm not doing this just for today. We got to keep doing this and keep for our own children as well.
Absolutely. Oh, so true. It's so true. And I really love that you're taking a holistic in terms of the whole family perspective and you're wanting to collaborate with organizations. And who are you working with in these?
Yeah, so over 5 years, I've been working with the Maternal Mental Health Alliance in the early days, especially, which is an organisation that brings about 70 organisations together, and we tackle we got an economic report, but that actually says in the UK that if we invest £337 million per year into perinatal mental health services, it will actually save 8.1 billion.
What?
And that's for the mother and child. Yeah. It is an economic report, which I think America should have too.
Yeah.
Because early prevention it actually saves money, and the government, this is what they want to save. They want to save money, but because 22% of that is on the mother and 78% is on the child's development, early development, because we haven't even talked about the bonding and attachment, which is so important, especially in the early years as well. So, and that doesn't include the father, believe it or not. So, I feel it's over 10 billion because obviously, that doesn't say nothing about the father. So yeah, economic report is out there, actually says that we can save money if early prevention services were in place. And I can actually say this now because I've been invited by the Royal Family's charity on Mental Health Day. This is not going to go out now till later because I could tell you this because obviously I got to keep it because of security. So after the 10th of October, okay. So Prince William actually came out and explained that father's mental health is so important on Father's Day in 2016. And I've been invited by the charity. So yeah, things are developing more.
Cool.
So yeah, it's good.
That's amazing. Your work is getting out there in such a big way.
The thing is, like I said, is, the awareness means more to me. And when you've got a father or family to say, and look, Mark, thank you. That's priceless. Absolutely priceless, worth more money. And obviously, it's a lovely feeling. That even by sharing this story, I got fathers actually said, Mark, I don't feel I'm alone, and that's a massive, massive thing. So yeah, please, guys, share your stories. Get your stories up there, the podcast and made him. She's doing. just get your stories out there. Let's all join together and get the proper services that should be done for families.
You're so right. Oh my God. You almost made me cry. Yes. I know that feeling of having somebody reach out to you and say that they don't feel alone anymore, or that oh my gosh, I now realize that that's what I was dealing with for 2 years or, 3 years or however long. It's just, it takes us talking about this for other people to feel heard and seen and know that it's okay, and to step outside of, their mind for a minute and say, oh my gosh, this is a thing. This is not just in my head. I'm not the only person here suffering, and oh, there is help. I can get help. I can feel better.
Absolutely. Yeah. God, honestly, I think, like you said, we've got a lot of way to go.
Yeah.
I think it is starting, especially I know in the UK, it's really building up now, because I go back to the economic report, the government will save money.
Right.
If they put early prevention in place, and that's good for everyone, really. So yeah,
right.
Just like I said, share your story. It's about every story is totally different. So like you said, my story is totally different to the next person. So the more people we can get forward, fathers, please share your story. Yeah. We need stories, and that's what I'm struggling to get at the moment. Is fathers come forward quick.
So if somebody wants to share their story with you or find you and connect with you online, how can they do that? Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can Google me, Mark Williams, reaching out, pmh.co.uk, you can put in, but my Twitter is Mark Williams, ROW.
Okay.
And I'm on Facebook, different things. Yeah, if you look at fathers reaching out, there's a lot of stories, press and stuff I've done on television and stuff like that. So yeah, any help I can do, just signposting, perhaps, people like, to yourselves or anything, please just get in touch.
Sure.
Be more than happy to speak to you, definitely.
Awesome. So I will go ahead and put all of your contact information also in our show notes, and I will connect all of your social media and all of your online stuff to contacts to this episode so that people can find you that way too.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. What I do say is the quicker the help, the quicker recovery, and it is an illness. So please just get, go and get help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing your story and sharing your message and giving hope to fathers and letting them know that they're not alone. I mean, this is so necessary and so needed, and that you are out there, willing to be the voice for fathers is just so powerful and inspiring. And I thank you so much for being with us today.
No, thank you, Kath. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Good luck with your work as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
By joining us today and listening, you're a part of the growing community of people who are aware and concerned for mothers and families during this beautiful and sometimes very difficult time of life. Please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review this free podcast so that Mom and Mind can be found by moms, families, and providers who will benefit from hearing our talks. If you or someone you know is having a hard time, help is available. Please look for resources for help at momandmind.com, where you will also find links and information from today's episode. Thank you for listening and being a part of the Mom and Mind community.